Guys, welcome back. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about something that's pretty important. It's a couple different subjects. What we're talking about today is ultimate oil and gas recovery. And that is the overall idea that was presented in about the 1970s. The idea being that at some point in time, there won't be enough drilling rigs, refineries, and infrastructure to keep up with the demand. And I studied this idea in my undergraduate while I was working on petroleum engineering. I didn't graduate from petroleum engineering. I graduated with elementary education degrees because I decided I wanted to be a school teacher instead of working in the oil field my whole life. And I ended up not doing that either, thank goodness. Anyway, tangent there. So I was studying ultimate oil and gas recovery as an undergrad. And the idea with ultimate oil and gas recovery, like I just told you, that there won't be enough rigs and infrastructure and everything to keep up with demand. And I looked at that and I thought, possibly. And the reason why I think that is the rotary rig count when I was a young man working out in the patch. Surface rigs in the United States, there were 1,900 surface rigs. Surface and offshore are the two different rigs we'll talk about. So 1,900 rotor, that was the Baker rotary count when I was a young man working on drilling rigs. I just vividly remember, I was like, holy crap, there's a lot of drilling rigs out there. And there were a lot of drilling rigs. This was in the early 2000s, late 1990s, early 2000s when I worked out in the oil field on the drilling rigs. Well, I trucked too. I did heavy haul trucking and I did roughnecking on the rigs. I did a bunch of stuff out there. And so I remember that rotary count. And you can look it up if you want. Baker Tools has a rotary count. So you just look it up, Baker rotary tool count, and it literally gives you the exact number of surface drill rigs. And so right now there's 720. And the reason for that, for the dramatic decline in surface drilling rigs, is not because of ultimate oil and gas recovery. Ultimate oil and gas recovery is, we'll explain that a little bit later. So the real problem on why the rig count is so shallow, so small right now, it has to do less with legislation and government bodies and more to do with the reality of drilling oil and natural gas. The wells that my grandpa drilled, they were mountains of oil and under there. So the formation, it was almost like a mountain of oil under there. And they were still getting gushers. They'd drill a well and they'd perforate the string. What they do is they drop the pipe down the hole, and then they've got this special tool that shoots holes out and it perforates the drill string. Not the drill string, the production string. And then, stuff starts flowing into it. And they do that during completion. So they take the drill rig off, put a completion rig on there, perforate it, and then it starts going. Well, like I said, when my grandpa was drilling wells, they had gushers. And Cud blowout preventers was a huge company back then. The blowout protection and well overpressurization, all these companies, they had a lot more business even when I was a young man, even when I was a baby, than they did than they do now. And that's not just because of like safety factors have grown by factors of 10. It's not that. The reality is the wells my grandpa drilled were the size of mountains. So they'd drill it and perforate the string and it'd gush. If it was natural gas, it'd blow the drilling rig off the pad. And they'd have to bring Cud in, and Cud would fight the fire and put it out, and they'd cap it, and then boom, it was a great well. Well, the wells, and my dad worked in the oil field for a little bit after he got out of the Navy, before he got into instrumentation and automation. And so his wells were somewhere in between my grandpa's and mine. The wells I drilled are as thick as I am tall, the formation is, and to get a recoverable amount of oil and gas from them, we would come down through the earth, we'd park we'd call it a ramp, we'd park a ramp right here, and then we'd bounce the drill string off of it sideways, and then over here we're going through the pay zone this way, sideways, and then we'd land the drill string, and then the production string come in and get perforated through that. To get enough of the perforation string into the pay zone, we'd have to go in sideways through the formations now. And they're as thick as I am tall. And then after all of that, we have to bring in about 14 truckloads, semi-truck trailers full of nitrogen. And we pump that nitrogen down the hole, the liquid nitrogen, it fractures the formation, and then you get exactly what you think. The leftovers. That's right. We're working on the leftovers, ladies and gentlemen. And it's the same way with the oil and the gas. When I was a little boy, the gas wells were still really strong. They would still blow wells or drilling rigs off the wellhead or off the, off the spud. And now there's a 400 horsepower compressor on each well. So it's burning gas from the well to push gas into the pipeline. So part of that is because the refinery capacity has peaked, and part of that is because the gas wells just aren't strong like they used to be. So we're really at the leftovers. And the reason the government doesn't want everybody to know about all of this is because what would happen is it would just turn into complete pandemonium. There's a reason Saudi Arabia is buying oil. I mean, they're buying oil. Everybody's like, oh, it's because they use they need to supply, they got Brent lightweight, sweet crude, whatever. They've got sour crude, whatever the case is. Well, the fact is, through catalytic reactions, they've got these things in refineries called cat crackers. It's a funny name. And it's this giant vessel full of these little marbles that have like platinum. That's it. A type of platinum. And they're these little yellow balls that kind of look like sandstone. They're really impregnated with platinum. And it's heated. This vessel's heated, and then the material, the product, is percolated up through this vessel, and through that it's magically catalyzed into either a heavier or a lighter product. So you're either cracking off hydrocarbons or adding them. It works both ways. You can go both ways with the catalytic reaction. And so there is, it's completely feasible for places like Saudi Arabia to make whatever kind of fuel they want out of their reserves. The problem is they've been running out of oil since the 70s. That's right. Those oil embargoes were about a geologist who said, hey, you guys need to put the brakes on if you want to keep up this kind of growth and production. You pump the brakes a little bit. And so the Arabs were, the OPEC Arabs and all of them, they were like, really? They took notice, so they cut back production. At that time, they were kind of like vassal states that had grown out of the vassal state era, and now they're actual nation states. And they're in the same position as us. the formations that their grandpas drilled are mountains of oil. And the formations they're drilling now are as tall as me. There's the leftovers. We're running on leftovers right now, ladies and gents. We still have significant reserves. You know, there's still a lot of unproven and undeveloped. There's still a lot of proven and undeveloped. There's still a lot of oil and gas out there, especially out in the ocean. The problem with that is the rigs to go out to get oil out of the ocean it's basically like, it costs as much as building like 100 rigs, and you only get the production of 5 rigs. So that's where we're gonna get into ultimate oil and gas recovery now. So now we're talking about ultimate oil and gas recovery. So let's pretend like the surface oils don't matter. So we'll just pretend like they don't matter, that they're depleted, and there's very few of them. And we'll focus primarily now on the ocean vessels, on the ocean drilling rigs. And like I said, you gotta spend about as much money to build 100 surface drilling rigs, doubles or triples, take a pick. It's a heck of a lot cheaper to build a surface drilling rig than it is an ocean going one. So it costs 100 times more, and you basically only get 5 rigs on a platform. So you get 5 rigs for 100 times the cost. So it makes it a lot more difficult proposition when we're talking about ocean going rigs. And then we've got to fly helicopters and boats out there. It's a big, big, big deal. So that ultimate oil and gas recovery is a great theory too, and it really applies to today for our ocean going drilling rigs. Like I said, doesn't really count as much for surface because we have more. There's way more than 700 rigs out there. They're laid up in yards. There's about 1,200 rigs laid up in yards right now, or they've been sold off and sent to China or wherever, Africa, Russia. We shipped tons of equipment to Russia when I was a young man. We couldn't build equipment for Russia fast enough when I was a young man. And everybody was looking at each other like, why are we building them all of this equipment? Well, this was before they had nationalized their oil and gas industry. So, you know, there's not a ultimate oil and gas recovery situation on surface as there is offshore. And so those are 2 really important things we need to think about. We need to think about depleted reserves. That's where we're at now on surface. So we're at the depleted reserves because the formations I drilled were only as tall as me, and we go in sideways and get the leftovers. The formations my grandpa drilled were as big as mountains, and they were gushers that would blow the drilling rig off the pad. When we look at offshore, that's different from depleted reserves. What we're talking about offshore is an ultimate oil and gas recovery issue. And ultimate oil and gas recovery issues offshore is where there's just not, you can't build offshore drilling rigs fast enough and cheaply enough to recover all the oil at the kind of market prices that we're doing right now, $112 a barrel. It's going to be hard to justify a 100-fold increase in drilling, offshore drilling string or drill rig production, you know, producing the actual drilling rigs at 120, even at $120 a barrel. So to get to the kind of production and the kind of money that we're talking about to move more to offshore, we're gonna have to see like $400 a barrel oil. And $400 a barrel oil is $10 a gallon base. That means before it ever hits the pipeline or the refinery or anything, it's gotta be 10 bucks a gallon. And that's gonna be a huge problem for us all because $10 a gallon would make it 3 times more expensive. So your energy costs net will go up 3 times. And that's going to be happening here within the next 15 years. Thankfully, there's a lot of solutions. If you're a homeowner and you have some land, some of the solutions that you could employ immediately are solar panels. So if you live in an area where there's good sun, even just 30%, of the sun needed, that's still going to make a huge difference. The Sun Belt states, California, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Texas, New Mexico, and then all the way down into, the other sunshine belt, all the way through the south of Florida. These are all great places for solar panels because you could literally run your whole house and everything, your car and everything, off of your solar panels with a small battery array and a huge solar array, if you have the land. One major issue I see with solar panels that people are coming into a lot is they're penetrating their vapor barrier on their roof to put these solar panels on. And to me as a contractor, when I see other contractors penetrating people's vapor barriers, I take pause and I tell them, maybe you should think about maybe a ground mount solar array since you have so much land. And some people, I'm sure, would love to do that. And some people just don't have the land. What are some other things you can do? If you're not independently wealthy, you could buy an electric car right now for a very affordable price. A Nissan Leaf is $7,000. My electric Focus, I paid $8,000 for it. So you don't have to be a multi-millionaire to make something happen for yourself when it comes to changing. You don't have to, kill yourself to make change in your life. You don't have to kill yourself working or anything like that. You don't have to. Take some simple changes. Take your car less, bike some more, pack your lunch. I mean, a lot of these simple things in life can really make a huge impact for you. And maybe buy an electric car and drive it for stuff that you don't need a internal combustion engine machine for. And I'm a huge fan of cars. Keep your cars. Keep your gasoline cars, your diesel cars. That's good. I still have all my gasoline cars. I got my Wrangler. I got a couple pickup trucks. I got a Mustang. And then I got an electric Ford Focus. And the reason I have that is because I was serious one day. I woke up and I was like, goodness, I had an epiphany. And so I was going to work really hard on getting my family as far off of hydrocarbons as possible. Naturally, we're still going to be using natural gas for electricity and coal for electricity. So I joke that a lot of people's cars are actually going to be running off of coal, your coal-powered car. My Sparky, he's a coal-powered car because he runs off. We don't have a solar array set up in our yard yet. We just pulled permits for it, and we don't have it set up yet. So we're running Sparky off of coal or natural gas by proxy of buying power off the grid. So there are things we can do about it. It's gonna be okay. Ultimate oil and gas recovery and depleted resources are not the end of us. They're not. We're gonna be okay. We're smart, we're resilient, and I heard there's this speech that one of the actors gives on Secondhand Lions, and he's like, it's a speech about being man, and he's like, what you gotta know is that the tenets of life is that people are mostly good, and that honor, dignity, and courage actually do mean something, and we're gonna be okay. So, and if we're not, I'm gonna keep telling myself that anyway. Leave your questions and comments down below, guys. I'd love to hear what your ideas are on this, and if anybody wants to give me an appointment to the federal government or something like that for a brain trust for geniuses, man, send them my way. Just leave your address in the comment and your P.O. box, and we'll start the... Obviously, that's never gonna happen to me. Oh, God. Leave your questions and comments down below.